Welcome back to Tumor Board with Hilario and Anish. I'm your co-host, Anish.
And this is Hilario.
Today, we're going to do a deep dive into the topic of palliative care. And to do that, we brought on a guest, Dr. Brian Gans. He is a palliative medicine doctor who specializes in treating cancer patients and even has non-clinical ventures into the space, including a newsletter and YouTube channel for patients and families, and artwork inspired by his patients. So, Brian, welcome to our show.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is really cool. I'm excited.
So, Brian, we met via Twitter, actually, and what inspired me to reach out to you was your newsletter. I've honestly never came across something similar, and I thought it was really neat that you were starting that, and I could see how useful it could be. Palliative medicine is I think it's a newer specialty in a formalized sense. And I'm curious, how did you even start thinking about palliative medicine, and how did you even get into medicine? Was it something that you thought about?
Yeah, so I guess even as a kid, like in elementary school, at the time, people would talk about like, what career do you want to be? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? That was just like such a common thing. And for me, it was always something, like science and medicine and doctory stuff was just like my child brain always liked that stuff. And then, as you progress and I, went to high school, and it all became more serious, I started to consider it, like, could I become a doctor? And I like science, I like biology, I watched a lot of Scrubs, which maybe
Scrubs was the more of the realistic of the doctor shows, right?
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. There was like a Reddit thread. I feel like there's always Reddit threads every so often on, what is like the best medical show? And it's always like Scrubs is the most accurate.
Yeah.
So that, I definitely gravitated towards medicine for a variety of reasons. It's very like cognitively demanding. It's like you're kind of like using a whole variety of skill sets. And I always like really dynamic processes where you're using like a lot of skills at once. So I really like medicine. And before I went to medical school, I did 2 years at UPenn doing clinical research just to dip my toes in the water. And I was telling myself, I'll work with a cardiologist. I'll see if I like that. And I love the cardiologist fellows I work with a lot. And, they definitely sold me on a career in medicine. So fast forward, to internal medicine, it wasn't until like maybe mid second year where I started to have more, once you're not like worried about, you're just so, I feel like constantly worried about, as an intern about learning the medicine and just like surviving. And then second year, you kind of like start to thrive a little bit as a senior resident. And it was when I could start like paying attention to the little things, the nuances that I, started paying attention to the palliative care consults and, the times where I was involving palliative care for my patients. And I was just marveled at the fact that they would come in and maybe have, like an hour long sit down with the patient or longer with the patient and family and just kind of like dramatically change the trajectory of everything or like, things that I thought were impossible, palliative care made it happen. Like a good discharge, clarifying goals, like treating pain that was previously intractable. All of those things were just like, they clicked for me. And I was like, okay, that's my calling. That's what I was meant to do. So that's how I kind of, that's like one of the, I guess, a small summary of how I got here, but yeah, it was like a lot of things, but that's the core.
Yeah. I think, for me, palliative care, I encountered for the first time as a third-year med student on my medicine rotation. It really blew my mind. It was the only time I feel like I actually had a solid conversation about goals, like a real in-depth conversation about goals of care. And how did you kind of go from just deciding palliative medicine to then specializing in specifically cancer patients?
It's always something that I had fancied, but I didn't know if it would ever be possible. So I think it was more serendipity than anything, because I grew up in Southern California, like on the West Coast. So, I did all my training in Pennsylvania. And I loved where I was, Lehigh Valley Health Network is where I did my fellowship. And oh my gosh, it's the most wonderful program in the whole world. I love it to death.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I wish it existed on the West Coast, but so I was looking for jobs, and Dignity showed up, and it was all oncology focused. And I thought, oh wow, that's like kind of novel, but I really dig it. And I applied and, got the job and moved. And so I think it really was just all kind of like serendipity. The job was there, the market conditions were there, and it just worked.
Right.
And so the need is there too.
Right. That's really cool. So you mentioned Dignity Health. That's where you work, right? Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because it doesn't seem like the traditional type of like healthcare practice, right?
Yeah. So I'm embedded within the cancer center. Like I'm on the third floor, where kind of the other practices are, like breast medical oncology is just, down the way, and, gynonc is there too. So, so whenever the patients are coming in to see their oncologist, like usually they'll just see me like right after. It kind of works perfectly that way.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about, the role of palliative care. So just like in niche, I really didn't encounter palliative care till maybe my last year of medical school, when I decided I was going to do radiation oncology. So I was working with the radons, and occasionally I would see palliative care. When I started intern year, the patient came in and we started talking to them about palliative care. Some patients just have this misconception that we're giving up on them because we want palliative care to come in. So I guess this is really a question about, why do you think palliative care is so important for patients and families, and not necessarily when you're, quote unquote, in the terminal stage?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important point, which is the current understanding, like the America in general, I think still equates or like conflates palliative care with hospice.
Right.
So there's still tons of room for education there. The role really is just to like support the patient and their loved ones, and whatever their goals are. If their goal is to be really aggressive with their oncology care, go down multiple treatment lines, and whatever it is, the goal of palliative care is really just to like help them be able to do that, whether it's by managing their symptoms, because I think it's really daunting to think, oh my gosh, like I'm getting full fox and like this and that, and nausea and weak, I think it's just so daunting to people that, if you have a service that can like really optimize all of those symptoms and like support them like along the way, you're just increasing their chances of adhering to like a curative treatment or a palliative treatment that may give a patient like more time and a better quality of life at the same time. So I think it really fits that role so perfectly, because we're all strapped for time, we all have less time with patients, and, hospitals are constantly having to deal with the same economic conditions that we all are. But like my whole practice is all based on supportive care. So, I feel like when you're able to give that to patients, everybody benefits. They're able to adhere to a treatment that they need or want, both. So yeah, if you could just like sum it up in one word, it's really just like support, tons and tons of support.
All right. And just to recap, what would you say the difference is between palliative care and hospice care? I'll be honest, I sometimes conflate the two together.
Yeah. So palliative care is like the top of the umbrella. Hospice is just like a super form of palliative care that is reserved for patients that have an estimated prognosis of 6 months or less. Like hospice is just delivering super high quality palliative care But because it's such a comprehensive benefit, like the Medicare hospice benefit, really sets the standard for all the other commercial insurance hospice benefits, which like they're all basically mirroring the Medicare benefit. But it's a good benefit. It covers a lot. It covers a whole team, a palliative care team that can come out to the patient's home and keep them at home. So it's all still palliative care, but it's like way more than you can get. Like my patients usually come to see me. They can see me as frequently as they need, but oftentimes like about 4 weeks when someone's getting active treatment is how often I see them. But on hospice, a hospice nurse could come out every single day if needed.
Gotcha.
And there's just no like, a traditional outpatient office visit would just never be able to accommodate that type of, it's like intensive care, really.
Right.
Hospice is like intensive palliative care.
Right. Okay. So we talked about, that there's certainly some misconception even within the medical community between palliative care and hospice care, and what palliative care's role is in like a patient's treatment. How do you think we go about addressing this misconception? Because like, I feel like it's either the patient accepts palliative care consult and palliative care talks to them, but before, do you think this is something that can be done when someone initially gets a diagnosis, or at what point do you think we can address this misconception so that people are more receptive to the idea of palliative care?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. And I think it needs to be delivered the right way. Like you kind of have to just like set it up and anticipate what questions the patient or family are going to have and what hesitations they're going to have. And you have to like know to address them like right off the bat. So I usually, and you mentioned like at diagnosis, like, yeah, palliative care can absolutely begin right at the very beginning. When someone's first diagnosed with a serious illness, they qualify for palliative care. And so if a clinician wants to involve palliative care and you're going to like, put in a referral or like consult them if you're in the hospital, I usually recommend that you kind of like frame it the right way, which kind of depends on the person too. Right. But yeah, you have to anticipate that they're going to have a hesitation. They're going to hear palliative care and it's going to scare them. So you have to like, I usually will say like, we're going to consult the palliative care team, and that may bring up a lot of emotions or, worries. But, so you can like, just kind of explain what it is then and there. If you feel comfortable with the way you explain it, which is like in the hospital, I would usually just explain it like, they're just like an extra layer of support. They're here to like focus on your pain and your symptom management. So if like, those are things that are bothering the patient, if you highlight that, that's probably going to make them feel better. Like, oh, okay, they're coming to address the pain. And I think it's okay if you like just highlight the thing that we're coming for. You can just say like, they're experts in pain management, and that's why we're consulting them, because we think your cancer in your liver is causing pain and they're going to help manage this. And then like, okay, that can be like one helpful tip that I use, or like, guide people when they're like about to consult and they think that there might be that reservation there.
Gotcha.
And make sure that they ask you questions and just have kind of like your own answers. If there ever is blowback or big emotions,
right.
You kind of like learn how to modify it so that people are feel better. And sometimes people will come to me and they're very worried because it wasn't explained in a way that made them feel better. And when I explain it, they're like, oh, okay, like, so I think everyone can get there. I think it's just like learning all the different ways you can explain it.
When you've been learning and practicing with time, how often did you watch your attendings or kind of senior residents or fellows do this before, you started to become better? Did you try and incorporate things that they did into your conversations, and did they in turn watch you?
Yeah, there's a lot of observing and listening in like the palliative care fellowship. It's just like core to what we do. So, I did a ton. My fellowship program director or the other attendings, like I love them all. And I literally took a little piece of them after watching the way that they explain things. And I thought, oh my gosh, that conversational element was just so perfectly crafted that I would have just absorbed that. And I continued to do that all throughout fellowship. And then I stayed as an attending in my fellowship program for about a year. And, that was just like fellowship year 2. That's what it felt like. Because it's only 1 year, the fellowship.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, in residency, I observed and listened a lot to the palliative care attendings that got me interested in the field. And then in fellowship, oh my gosh, tons of absorbing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
As radiation oncology residents, we work with the palliative care team pretty often when symptom management, pain management, and we see the patients sometimes together. We're doing the radiation part, but they're also consulted for pain management or something they can do with medication. Also just goals of care discussion. And it's really kind of neat to see them at work. And I always feel like I learn something and I want to incorporate what they do. But it's really challenging, and not just in the oncology space. Like, how can you, as a palliative care doctor, or other positions in the palliative care space, help other healthcare providers develop those skill sets?
Yeah, I think those skill sets naturally can be absorbed by others, like the radiation oncologist or the medical oncologist, just by like having lots of collaboration with the
Mhm.
palliative care doc. And like that's why I kind of like being embedded in this cancer center. Like it's such a great like model. I'm surprised that I didn't see, this type of job just like in other states. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think it just fits so perfectly. Like if you're there and you can talk to them, like the medical oncologists come by my office all the time and, pick my brain or, collaborate on something. I think that's the best way really to learn and share is like through direct conversations, like
Mhm.
being connected.
Mhm.
Because I feel like it's so easy to get like fractured and to feel like very far removed. But like, if they're and they don't have to be like down the hall either.
Sure.
Because, when I was doing inpatient palliative medicine and my fellowship program, the hospitalist would come by our little office all the time and,
Right.
talk to us. And that's such a
Mhm.
good way to learn. It's just like be there,
Mhm.
talk it out. Like, and in my residency at Lincoln Med Center, it was like old school, like we would go down to the radiologist, like in
Mhm.
the reading room, like talk to them,
Right.
like
Mhm.
that old school medicine. I don't know how long that type of thing is going to last for, or if that will just be like a remnant of
Mhm.
our training. I hope it
Right.
never goes away because I believe in it.
Yeah.
I have just been
Mhm.
that way of learning and existing is just so core to my being.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
These strategies for collaboration, like you mentioned just now with the radiology team, um, are there any for between the palliative care team and other physicians? Meaning, for example, is there a certain time where you would want the other practitioners to come talk to you about a patient, like if they have X amount of pain or if something's complicating? Because you can only see so many patients yourself. So I'm wondering, is there a time where you're definitely telling someone, "Hey, just reach out to me, and we can kind of help manage these symptoms together"?
Yeah, I'm always telling people like earlier, I just like, even if it's just like, the thought is only just starting, like nourish it, come and I'd love to talk about it. Yeah, earlier is always better.
Right.
That's definitely one of my mottos.
Mhm.
And yeah, sometimes you are, like sometimes a palliative care service can be very busy.
Mhm.
And yeah, maybe they can only see so many patients. But
Yeah.
then you still want to like get them like get involved earlier and like involve them more, because then that will help a program support, more FTEs and their like the growth of their program. So like I would say never, you don't want to feel limited, like, oh, they're busy, like maybe we'll just involve them, in the super difficult cases.
Right.
But in the coming decades, earlier is like will still be better. Like that
Right.
is only going to become more important, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I would definitely say that palliative care always made me feel better. I know it's for the patient, but they always made me feel better because whenever invariably we have these family meetings, I, when I do really have the time, I like to sit and just kind of hear what everybody's saying. And invariably, you get the sense that palliative care really, they have the lingo to just calm everybody down. You hear different family members putting their emotions and their wants onto the patient, and the patient is saying something different, and it's like, how do I juggle all these people's wishes, right? And I feel like when I was in an intern, particularly, like palliative care, like made me feel so much better. And another thing is that in other specialties, even Radonc, right, we like to get into the mode of how we do things. So like if someone has pain, there's like one medicine that we always go to, right? Or if someone has like nausea, there's like we're like one trick pony sometimes, right? Where we do the same thing.
Yeah.
But then like you encounter palliative care people and they're like, oh, if you can't do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And they give you like 5 options for like nausea alone, right? Or like 5 options for like pain control. I like to have like frequent, occasional encounters with a palliative care to kind of learn something from that. But anyway, so that's just my musings about palliative care.
I second what you said. I feel like even just like the didactics or anything from our palliative care team is so useful.
Right. Going to another aspect of palliative care, the kind of patients that you guys are exposed to certainly does have some, emotional challenges with it, right? So often when you're managing people with terminal illnesses, I think that there can be an emotional toll, right? So how do you cope and how do you, manage the mental aspect of your job?
Whenever people hear like that I'm a palliative care doctor, they're like, "Oh my gosh, how do you do that though? Like it's so sad." Maybe it's just like I have a particular mindset of it all. So maybe I'll kind of just explain the way like I conceptualize things, because it's the way I conceptualize it that I think is how it's like. So I'm able to do it, without it like taking more from me than I'm able to give back. Working in oncology has definitely taught me how fragile life is, Mm-hmm. Nowadays, we're living longer and we're accumulating chronic illnesses over time. Mm-hmm. Some people get all the way up to their 90s and they got nothing. And, God bless those people. But, for most people, we're going to have more chronic illnesses and life is hard. And if it's a serious chronic illness like cancer or, a rheumatologic condition or Crohn's or whatever it is, we're all treating those patients. And sometimes I think like, I don't know, is it any more sad? I guess like when you become closer to the prospect of death, I think you're gonna have different emotions there than, living with a chronic illness. But then dealing with a chronic illness, like a severe chronic illness for a long period of time, can be just as difficult as having like a cancer. Right. So it's like, and not all of my patients are dying either. Because we are getting more, like we're getting involved a lot earlier, like when we're involved really early, we're just kind of like another member of the, like I'm like a cardiologist or,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all play our parts. So, it certainly it's sad, when someone is approaching the end of life. And I think I've just become very good at like guarding my own heart and my own emotions, right? I've learned not to give more than I can give. Mm-hmm. Making sure that I only see so many patients in a day. I'm emotionally present in every interaction. And yeah, it takes energy. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just make sure that I replenish that energy, like the well that bubbles up and like flows out, into the patients. I have to rebuild that. So self-care, if I were to like, that was a long way of answering your question. So if I simplified it, I think the answer to your question is self-care is really important.
All right.
Definitely.
All right.
Is that idea of the importance of self-care how you kind of got into the art and even the yoga that you talked about? I've seen your website. I got to say your artwork is beautiful. It's actually
it's fantastic.
really, really great. Yeah, it's really great. And I did read you had a blurb, I think, on the page and how it was inspired by your patients and some situations with them. Is that kind of the origin of it, kind of being an outlet for some of that emotional toll?
Yeah, it's definitely like all wrapped up in there.
Mhm.
It and I think I just because I used to like draw a lot as a kid. I would draw like anime, like
Mhm.
Goku, Vegeta, like nerdy
Right, right.
stuff, the Dragon Balls stuff.
Right, right.
Like,
Love it.
and like back then, I never thought of it. It was just kind of like fun. Um,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
but when I went back and I got more serious, like, oh, maybe I want to like do this just more regularly.
Mhm.
I kind of partly did structure it as a way, to rebuild my emotional energy, like have an outlet for whatever it is that I'm feeling.
Right.
I think art is such a good way to express, your emotions and things that there are just things that cannot be expressed with words or by writing, like
Right.
it just needs like I'll look at a piece of art, that has a certain combination of colors and I'll feel something that like, I don't even know how I would explain it.
Right.
So yeah, I think part of it was putting my time and energy into something that's like restorative.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely like a huge origin story
Right.
for like my
Mhm.
art is to like heal my own soul, nurture it, and then like use that as a way to like replenish all that energy because we're definitely giving a lot of it out
Mhm.
every
Mhm.
day. So yeah, I think that was an important part of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have you ever shown your patients this artwork, or is if a specific patient inspired you to make that painting? Have you ever showed them that?
Yeah, I actually have printed out some of them, and I like put them because I use the same exam rooms, so
Mhm.
I like put a little picture there, and yeah, it's people have they I think because I like color, like kind of very positive, happy, like I use a warm color palette, magenta,
Mhm.
orange, and yellow are some of my favorite colors. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that patients have definitely asked me, and I can see in the back end of my website, with Google Analytics, I can see all my site traffic, and I
Mhm.
can tell when
Mhm.
people
Right.
really like stuff. So yeah, they've liked
Mhm.
it, um, but I've never made anything specifically for like one patient. It's kind of I do it more like
Gotcha.
general, like what am I
Mhm.
feeling this week or month, kind of a
Right.
thing.
Right.
But yeah, when they see this stuff,
Mhm.
they're always so enthused by it. And I was like, oh, that's so
Right.
cool that you like that. Right. Yeah. Because it feels weird to like, show your art. Like it's like so personal.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah.
I also think it's like meant to be shared. So unless you're, using very macabre subject matter or whatever, it's
Mhm.
usually very positive and happy, or at least that's my intent. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely comes off that way for sure.
Where do you see your creative ventures and your work as a palliative care doctor? Do you intend to kind of marry both of them and incorporate both of them in your practice? Or is that something that like you see more as a therapeutic effect for you, something to get away from, the emotional aspect of your job?
I honestly, marrying the two together is something that I would love to do.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think I'm kind of like in the process of figuring out how to do that.
Mhm.
Which right now is just like having it on, it's just like my weekend thing.
Mhm.
Um, but like, I don't know, could this type of art or just art in general, like weave its way more into like mainstream
Mhm.
medicine
Right.
or like in hospitals? And I think there's huge potential for that. Oh my gosh. Like
Right.
if I could be
Mhm.
like, part-time artist,
Mhm. Mhm.
or like, like just like bring
Yeah.
that to whatever
Mhm.
spaces, offices, that would be so cool.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I do have plans for, having like a palliative care, like inspired art.
Mhm.
I'm just like, it's, it's just like really difficult to get to the point where you're like, okay with sharing certain parts. Cause I haven't shared everything.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
Right.
so yeah, I would love to like develop that, like bring it
Mhm.
in. Cause I haven't seen, there are some like artists that are also physicians or nurses or,
Mhm.
what have you, that have brought art into the space. So yeah, I think there
Right.
is huge potential to bring that in. And in the future,
Mhm.
um, I think just because I'm doing it like passively in my free time, there's no
Mhm.
pressure to like scale it.
Right.
It's like pretty
Mhm.
I mean, painting is expensive, like more expensive than I thought it would be.
Right.
But yeah, I'll just probably continue growing it over time and, let it naturally blossom into whatever it also,
Okay.
I'm like one of those people that like, I plan the big structure of something, but then like what it's going to actually look like when the brick is laid,
Right.
It's kind of fun to see how things naturally develop too.
Right. So I would say, and I'm not prescribing anything for you here. What I would say, when I saw your website, I saw some of your art, and I saw that you were into yoga, right? In my head, it was like, what if Brian had like this like yoga studio? What he just displays is like his art, right? And also like kind of does yoga with his patients sometimes, they say on the weekend some of his patients can just come to this yoga studio and the instructors there, but also get to like experience your art on the wall while they're doing all of that. That idea is just like something that was like a picture in my head. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah,
that's such a good picture, though. I love that.
Yeah, it is. One of our satellites places in Buckingham, there is actually a nearby kind of like a yoga studio where people can also go do little exercises, but it's really for all the cancer patients. And it's actually like the community that created that resource for patients that live within that county area to be able to do that. And I thought it was a very neat, approach to people who have cancer and like kind of dealing with, life as a cancer patient. So let's go.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm curious, as you develop this platform, your newsletter and your YouTube channel, who is the intended audience for that, and what do you hope to convey?
Yeah, I struggled a lot at first thinking like that was like one of the things that, kept me from like starting the process. Like, okay, who am I doing this for?
Right.
Which is kind of like the same question anyone that's doing something entrepreneurial has to figure out, like, who's your audience? Like, who are you talking to? And
Right.
I think I've settled on talking to like the patient and their loved ones, just family. Like, it's just like it's what I do on a daily basis, and I like doing it. So I figured like, why not do it that way? But then I do want to have content that's made specifically for like radiation oncology fellows or like palliative care fellows, medicine residents. Because that's something that I definitely looked for stuff like that when I was in fellowship, and I didn't find it. So, I don't know that anyone's done it yet. So,
right.
I'd like to also do that. But for now, the way I'm like planning on building it is mostly like for people like my parents. My dad keeps telling me like, you should do yoga for seniors. Like, it'd be so like perfect. And it's like, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So, cool. But it's like hard because, you have to make things accessible. You have to explain things because we're so, we learn all this medicalese in medical school. And then we just like eventually only speak medicalese. So it's, finding the way to simplify things and explain things clearly and concisely is definitely the challenge. So yeah, that's my plan now, is to have like a very like clear, concise, like broken down version of stuff that I think would be very helpful for like anyone. Like, let's say you were just diagnosed with cancer, like where might you find some that like, and you've heard that palliative care is going to be involved. Like, so how do you learn more about that? Well, like the cancer center websites, like MD Anderson or cancer.gov, like I feel like in order to like optimize content to rank well on Google, content has to be kind of like very generic, and I just don't think it's been personalized very well yet. So that's kind of like my goal, is to like really personalize things. Like what if you could talk to a palliative care doctor, pick their brain like before, like what would they say? Like, would that be helpful? That's kind of like, I guess what I'm trying to do is like, what if you could talk to me? What would I say? So that's kind of like what my blog slash newsletter, slash website it's meant to be there as like an accessible resource that has, helpful, unique information that you probably can't get in other places. That's the hope. Is that it's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, so just moving to like the last maybe segment of our conversation, wanted to talk a little bit about some ethics and like some of the future of palliative care. Palliative care is in some way delicate specialty, or you're dealing with delicate patients, right? And so, what are some ethical considerations or issues that you typically would encounter in a palliative care setting?
Whenever there's like ethical problems, like usually palliative care ends up involved. But like in general, I think the major like ethical like zones, medical aid in dying is like obviously a huge one that is gonna, like, when you think like what are some of the ethical considerations, like that's definitely one that is a hot topic. I mean, some other situations that can be kind of like maybe like ethically heavy, or when you're deciding to like withhold or withdraw life sustaining treatments, whether it be like vasopressors or antibiotics or intubate, mechanical ventilation with intubation. I think those are like times when ethical considerations usually come up. And of course there are like cases, like historical cases, precedent setting cases like Terry Schiavo, or what are some other ones? There are definitely some other ones out there. I've got a book on, like, one of my palliative care books is just on the ethics and legal side of things. So that's definitely there. I feel like there's definitely ethical considerations that are really important to the practice of palliative care. But they don't come up as frequently. I mean, I feel like there's like smaller scale ones that, anytime you're in an intensive care unit, you're going to be dealing with like heavy stuff. Ethical considerations are always going to come up. But I feel like a lot of times most physicians are pretty well equipped to deal with some of those.
Right. So like, I feel like United States obviously is a very diverse country. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but like, but and historically, like, medicine hasn't been a place where there's a lot of consideration for different cultures. For example, like if you do dermatology, right, in the United States, a lot of our textbooks just show like white people's skin, right, to show like all different kinds of rashes, for example, right? What do you think the field of palliative care can improve on when it comes to talking to people of different cultures and really understanding what their cultural context is, to be able to talk there?
Yeah, I think palliative care is definitely a wonderful service line to involve whenever anyone feels like it is challenging or difficult to deliver really culturally sensitive care, or because I feel like there's just so much like sensitivity and communication and attention to the emotional space with palliative care that oftentimes we can kind of like help navigate like culturally sensitive or just like navigate cases where we want to provide really culturally sensitive care, and just because we spend so much time with the patient and their family, I literally I've always offered to the patient or their family that they can ask me every single question they have, and I'll literally sit there until they've got no more questions. Everything is clear, or they're maybe if they've expended their emotional energy and they cannot continue that day, I'm like there the next day. So like when it comes to like, and being more culturally sensitive and like finding better ways to take care of people of different cultures, palliative care I feel has a lot to offer, because if you communicate with people, you're going to figure out what their needs and their wants are. So I think that's really the key is like, are we giving, everyone enough time? Like if someone does have a very, very different cultural background, like, maybe their approach to end of life is very different from like the typical norm in America. The way that you're going to find that out is by having a really good conversation with them and helping the patient or their family to discover what it is they want and they need. Like that needs time and conversation. So yeah, I think like conversation and time is really that element that palliative care can bring to help everyone find the best ways to navigate, people of different culture and whatever their needs are.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the future, right? How do you see the field of palliative care evolving in the future? And what kind of things you hope to see in palliative care? So where do you think it's going and what do you want it to go?
I think it is going to go the way, like in my head where I want it to go, I kind of like see it on the path.
Okay.
So that's good. I think those two paths are kind of aligned. So where I want it to go, and where I see it going is, obviously expanding and getting bigger, which is definitely happening. I see a lot of places are growing their palliative care programs and adding FTEs and, building up volume. There's, I can't remember these, the exact statistics. The last time I checked the Center to Advance Palliative Care's website, they track a lot of stats and are a wonderful resource for all this stuff. But yeah, places are definitely growing and getting bigger. And that kind of needs to happen because, like my parents, like my dad today's my dad's birthday, actually.
Oh, I thought we said happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah. So, he's like getting ready to start Medicare and navigating all of that.
Right.
So that's most of the country now. They're all going to be a huge amount of our population is about to get their welcome to Medicare letters. And, and they're all going to be living longer. Like my dad had prostate cancer and, was treated with curative intent and, is doing great now. So that's, the need for this specialty, I think, is only going to grow. So we're going to need to continue to grow to meet that demand.
Right.
But we're also going to have to do that in, the challenging economic times that we're in. The federal fund rate is increasing. Hospitals are, increasingly feeling that financial pressure, and we're going to have to continue to expand in these challenging times. So that's one thing. And then, kind of on the lines of what we were talking about earlier, getting involved earlier, I would love to see palliative care really brought in, earlier in the process than most people think. But maybe not as early as I would want, I mean, I would love to see every cancer patient, but there's going to be like some point when it, makes a lot of sense, but so maybe it is, closer to the diagnosis. And, so I think we're gonna have to find I don't know exactly where that point is. But we'll need to, grow to the point where we can really be involved, a lot earlier. And I would love to see hospice expand a bit more. Like for children that are diagnosed with cancer, they can receive concurrent hospice and like treatment that has like disease targeted treatments. So like chemo plus hospice, they can get that, but not for adults. So would I love to see that? I think I would love to see that. I'd love for all of our cancer patients to get hospice.
Right.
But that then hospice would really need to be redefined, I think.
Right.
But there's only, financial this is the government we're talking about.
Right.
So, I don't know if I'll get everything I want.
Right. Okay.
Brian, before we go, I do want to ask you, as we go through our medical training, I can recall specific moments in my training that I've been proud when I was able to accomplish.
Uh-huh.
What has been your biggest personal success as part of being a practicing palliative care provider? Has there been a moment where, you felt like you were very successful, very proud of that?
Yeah. And I feel like I consistently get those experiences. And it's whenever I help someone, maybe just through conversation, help them figure out what they want and what they need. And when they have that like aha moment, or they have clarity, or they just feel very at peace, like maybe they really wanted hospice, but they just didn't know how to navigate a conversation with their family, or even maybe with their oncologist, because, they look up to you guys a lot, and, they don't want to let you down. So, I feel like whenever I have helped someone like arrive, at their decision, or whatever their road that they want to walk down, like a lot of times they're very appreciative of those moments, and it like changes them, and like they share those emotions with me, and they're really positive. So I like feel those a lot. So yeah, whenever I like get to help people do that, it's personally very special to me. Because it's like literally, it's like life changing. So, I think the times where I get to do that, by just delivering high quality palliative care, that's always really special.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I think Laura and I will take a lot from this conversation, and, thank you for joining us, sharing your kind of unique experiences. And I'm sure some of our listeners have at least some of their interests piqued into palliative care. And we always want to ask our guests one final question. And that is there any recent book that you would like to recommend our listeners read?
I've got 2 books, and I don't know which one is better, so I'll just say them both. But it's Atomic Habits by James Clear. Has been like literally one of the most life-changing pieces of literature I've ever read in my life. And then Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss is like another one that I think is like right up there with James Clear's Atomic
So
Habits.
I'm gonna have to write down the Tools of Titans, but Atomic Habits. I mean, I'm reading it now. It is life changing. I think my girlfriend has heard me rave about it a little bit too much.
Right.
But I do recommend anyone out there to read it.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us this week, and please rate and like the show if you want to continue to hear more of this. We are on every podcast listening platform out there, and also on YouTube, and we'll see you guys in the next one.